All right, well, good morning, everyone. We think we are live at the Worldwide Bird Forestry Studios, aka headquarters. I am here with two bird forestry foresters, Cheyenne Marksberry. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Tyler Brady. Good morning. And so, folks, we have no idea what to expect from this. This is our first time to ever do a webinar slash Facebook Live, but we wanted to come on here to be able to provide some information for either landowners, prospective landowners, if you're looking at acquiring a timber plantation, or if you have a deer lease or you have some land that you want to convert for wildlife management, whatever the case may be, we just wanted to offer some more resources for you all. So this is our first effort. We hope you find it helpful. And for all of you who have subscribed to our newsletter, and that's how you found out about that, thank you so much for doing so. Please continue and let us know any information that you would like to see in the newsletter so that we can make that as beneficial as possible. So with that, real quick now, you may have already been introduced to Cheyenne because we did a little bit of a brief interview for the newsletter this week, but go ahead and talk a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how long you've been with bird forestry.
I am Cheyenne Marksberry. I'm a forester and wildlifologist here. I'm from Carthage, Texas, and I have been here for almost 4 years.
Well done. Tyler Brady.
Uh, as he said, I'm Tyler Brady. I'm also a forester and wildlife biologist with Bird Forestry. Been here a year less, right at 3 years. Loving every minute of it.
Well, fantastic. All right, well, let's just jump right into this. So, first of all, we've had some questions come in prior to the Facebook Live, and we also wanted to put just some information into this little webinar about things that are going to be coming up with the winter storm and some other things, and just some questions that we get from landowners quite frequently. And so, you guys, I'll ask the question. You just decide who wants to answer, and maybe both of you, however that works. So, one of the questions that we had was a few landowners have contacted Bird Forestry recently asking about carbon storage and the financial benefits that come with that. Is this something you all have been dealing with? Carbon storage.
Not on our scale as Bird Forestry. So with Bird Forestry, typically we're managing a private landowner who has anywhere from typically 40 maybe to 200 acres or so, and we haven't seen carbon storage in the forestry industry on a scale that small. So typically where you're seeing this is in your large timber companies, your TMOs, or your real estate trusts.
Okay.
That's where you're seeing a lot of that. And that's not to say that sometime in the future that may not be a thing, such as maybe a government incentive through a government program, but that's not something we have seen as of yet.
Okay, very good.
It's usually several thousand acres that you have to own for those benefits, and our landowners just don't have that much.
Right, right. Now, one of the things that was noted on here that you guys brought up before the call was that like solar panels, and there are solar farms. I know that's a big thing right now. Just a second, I've got something coming up on my screen here, folks. Just please ignore that. All right. So solar farms are something that people are talking about right now. So how do the economics of that work? And if one of our landowners who's been harvesting timber off their property for, sometimes multi-generations, what should they know about solar farms? Are we doing anything in that? You guys have any input on that?
So, yes, you see some solar out in East Texas. Typically, it's on the roof of somebody's house or in the oil and gas industry running small pumps, things like that. So here's the deal. Out in the Trans-Pecos region of Texas, which is West Texas, flat, arid, very minimal trees, you get 11 inches of rain per year.
Right.
So what that means is there's a lot less cloudy days, a lot more sunny days, so it's a lot more efficient.
Okay.
In East Texas, we average 44 inches of rain, literally 4 times as much rain. So that's 4 times as many cloudy days, four times less sun. So it's not super efficient out here. And then I think trees are the cream of the crop out here.
Right.
That's what you're selling and making your money on.
Right, right. So I hear what you're saying is if I'm a landowner or a prospective landowner, let's just say I'm doing a 1031 exchange, I've had a big exit on another real estate development or property or somewhere, and I'm buying raw land that has a timber stand or is a timber plantation, probably out here the economics are such that I'm better growing trees than wiping them out and putting in a solar farm.
Correct. And you can use that 1031 when you sell timber. So if you sell timber, the profit that you make off that, if you put it back into, say, buying another stand of timber, you can use that 1031 tax exchange.
So I want to tag on to that a little bit, because what Tyler is saying is one of the biggest benefits of deciding to actually grow timber. So, as you may or may not know, if you are selling an investment property, it can be multifamily, it can be raw land, it can be as simple as a rent house. If you are selling that, the capital gains from that property can be rolled over to another like property through the 1031 exchange process. So you don't actually have to pay the capital gains on that, as long as you're taking those gains and investing in a like property. So say that again, Tyler, because I think that's one of the things. That's one of the things whenever I first started figuring out the forest industry, coming with you guys, doing some consulting, was that I had no idea that you could do the same thing basically with the trees that are harvested, right? So explain that again. I'm a timber owner. I own 500 acres. We do a cut. Explain that tax benefit to me one more time.
So essentially, the money that you make on the timber sale is taxed because it's income, and that's taxed at a capital gains rate. Well, if you take the profit that you made from that timber sale and you reinvest that
So if I'm doing my replanting or anything,
it would not include that.
Okay, just land.
There are just buying other land, or you could go out and buy a rent house.
Got it.
Any kind of investment property. There are tax breaks for replanting and reforestation, but it's called the timber tax credit. It's a totally different thing. But your 1031 tax deferred exchange would go into making another investment.
Got it. And one of the things that's important, and I want you to get to it too. Go ahead, Cheyenne.
I was just saying, I think, is that with a lump sum sale only instead of a pay as
That's
cut?
any kind of sale. You're going to pay the same taxes, whether it's a pay as cut or a lump sum.
And just a disclaimer, just so that you folks know, we are not CPAs, we're not an accounting firm, but here's the thing that Bird Forestry does. We are a company, or these guys, what they do is make sure that you're getting the highest and best use of your property, whatever the case may be, whether it is for a timber stand, whether it's for wildlife management, whatever the case may be. So we work with experts day in and day out, and that is the difference between a consultancy and, say, a timber salesman or something to that effect. What Bird does is takes the entire, kind of like the conductor of an orchestra, if you will. If you're having a timber sale, then Bird Forestry, you come in and we're going to make sure that everything goes seamlessly and that you get the highest and best use of your property. You say that's right?
Yeah.
All right, I just made that up on the fly. So if you like that, folks, that's what we do. Now, one of the things that I think is very pertinent right now, since we even planned this Facebook Live, is the winter storm we just had. I mean, first one that we've had like this in nearly 100 or over 100 years, I guess. So, Cheyenne, what is some of the damage that some of the landowners may have had, and why is it important that they tackle those issues right now to basically save their investment?
Well, right now we're doing our inspections, getting out there and trying to assess the damage and see what tracks need to have, the next action done to them. And we have seen some tracks in Louisiana that have had a lot of breakage, tops breaking off of pine trees, especially with the more recently thinned, kind of younger pine plantations. And while those trees are still green, if the salvage sale is needed, we need to hurry up and get started on that, and before the rest of the damage is going to be seen years to come. So trees are going to start dying off.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too for the environmentally conscious out there. One of the things, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the wildlife biologists and professional foresters. I am not. But a lot of people think that, well, if a tree's dead and it's in the woods, no harm, no foul, right? But that's not quite the case, correct? A dead tree can actually be as environmentally damaging as opposed to one that's actually managed in the cleanup, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I've always heard with the wildlife management of our national forests is there's a lot of dead trees out there, and they can actually be harmful to the environment as opposed to actually getting those dead trees out. Am I right on that?
In some cases, but typically a dead tree, from a wildlife perspective especially, a dead tree is awesome. You have standing dead snags, which provide awesome habitat for different types of birds, sometimes squirrels, snakes, things like that. and then you have what you call your downed woody debris, which is stuff that falls down on the ground, and over time it decomposes. But lots of insects, beetles, all kinds of stuff, they feed on that and they live in that. That's their habitat. Without that, you wouldn't, you'd lose that part of the food chain, and that could, create a catastrophic effect going down.
Got it. See, that's why they're the experts.
Mhm.
Now, but as far as actually protecting your investment, to your point, Cheyenne, if you have a dead tree, you do still have a window of time to at least salvage some of that investment before it just becomes habitat for the wildlife, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
And that's kind of what we're doing right now with our inspections as far as after the storm. So we've been out and we've looked at several different tracks, especially stuff that has been thinned recently. And by and large, yes, we're seeing damage. A lot of it is older, big pasture trees that have lost limbs, and for the most part, those are going to be okay. You may have some issues with insects or something possibly down the line, but by and large, it's going to be okay. What our main concern is seeing these stands that are just thinned, they're very young, and the tops are broken out of them. Not just the very, very tip top where it's still got some needles and things like that, and they've still got good limbs. It's where the top's broken off 16 feet above the ground, where we could still get one log out of it and get it out, but
Right.
and I will say that damage has been seen where the freezing rain was. So up north, where the further up north you got, I think it was the second day of the storm, there was a lot of sleet, and a little further north was a lot of snow, and by and large that stuff's okay. But the further south you got, kind of between that Sam Rayburn up north to just north of Nacogdoches, and then going east into Louisiana, you really got a lot of that freezing rain, and that's where the damage was.
Okay. Now that brings us to another point, which Cheyenne and we talked about in your video a little bit: management inspections. Considering the fact that there has been some damage done, but even if there hasn't been some catastrophic weather event, talk a little bit about what happens during a management inspection, why it's important, why it's so important that some of our clients actually get an annual inspection every year. That's part of the deal, right? So if I'm a landowner, why is it important to have a professional like one of you guys come out and check my land on a regular basis?
Well, a lot of our landowners, they don't get the opportunity to go out to their property. They know they have property and they might know where it's located, but they don't know what to look for if they do go out there. So we know to look for any signs of insects or disease issues or trespassing. I mean, it has came where we've seen properties that just the timber was harvested on it and the landowner had no idea because someone came and stole their timber.
Right.
It happens a lot more than you want to know. So, and then check boundary lines and see when the next timber sale's done. So.
And you bring up a good point, Cheyenne, because this is something that I learned from you guys, is that a lot of the bird forestry clients are absentee landowners. This is an investment for them that they had done, that 1031 exchange, whatever the case may be, or a lot of them thought they wanted that hunter's paradise out in East Texas or Louisiana, Mississippi, or Oklahoma, one of the markets that bird forestry serves, and then it just didn't work out that way due to time constraints or whatever. So again, if you're someone considering investing in any type of rural property you don't have to be someone that has the mindset of, I'm going to harvest timber, I'm going to plant trees, or I'm going to set up a high fence and ranch. Bird forestry can help you, can be your partner in the acquisition of the property, actually through Terra Stone, which is one of our sister companies that is a wholly owned subsidiary of Bird Forestry. They can help you find the property, and then these guys can come behind and take a look and say, here are the things that you can do for the highest and best use of the property. You can go as deep or as little as you want, but know that bird forestry, you have somebody keeping an eye on it, taking a look at it, making sure that when there needs to be, my next topic, a controlled burn. That could be something that we can help you with and make sure that the property is maintained properly. So with that, Tyler, what is a prescribed burn? Why are they important? How often should they happen? Talk a little bit about that, because I know that's something that's really important to us.
Absolutely. We love burning at bird forestry. So a prescribed burn is essentially, it's a burn that we actually light the forest on fire. So it's not a wildfire, but it's an opportunity for us to, as one of our foresters here, Mark Bryan, said, weed the garden. So essentially, you're doing some type of forest management every weekend when you go out and you cut your grass, right? Because if you don't cut your grass, it turns into a forest eventually, right?
Absolutely.
So yes, it's kind of a really far back way to look at it.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what burning does. So essentially, we're cutting the grass in the forest. So we're getting rid of the fuel left, say, from the storm. These limbs that have fallen. So we're getting rid of that fuel that could potentially burn in a wildfire under not so good conditions that could cause damage to your stand. So when we do a prescribed burn, we have a window of opportunity with the exact right weather. We're out there, we're pushing fire lanes around the property. We are mitigating every risk possible to do damage to the storm. And that's what the prescription is. Okay. And then we go out there and we light the fire. And we make sure that the wind's right, the humidity's right, the temperature's right, the clouds are right, the vent. I mean, we look at all kinds of different variables. So we can have the absolute best chance of getting a good burn and getting control on competitive vegetation. So stuff that's competing with your pine trees if you're managing for timber. We're also getting rid of species that are not desirable and knocking species down to the height of wildlife. So a deer's life is 4.5 feet or less. So when you get this yopon that's growing up 10 feet in the air, a deer can't eat it. It's too big. Right. So we try and keep all that stuff down low to the forest floor so the wildlife can actually utilize it. It manages for aesthetics, and it's also great protection against wildfire. So back in 2011, there was the Bastrop Complex fire, right?
Right.
And if you ever drive down through Bastrop, whatever you say, it looks like a wasteland. And then all of a sudden you see this one little spot of big, beautiful pine trees. That didn't burn because it was prescribed burn the year before. They had a prescribed burn that went through there, and so that protected a lot of the cabins and things like that. And so I think the biggest benefit of a prescribed burn is it's protecting your asset. So if you did get a wildfire through East Texas, likely you're a lot less likely to have huge damage to your stand.
And how often should you do a prescribed burn?
So it depends on the ecosystem. Typically around here, we're looking in that 3 to 5 year range.
Okay.
There's some cases where you could burn every 2 years, and there's some cases where you might push it back a little bit. But typically, we like to start a burn after the first thin. So somewhere between that, 15 and 20 year range, depending on. There's all kinds of factors that go into when you first thin a stand, but typically it's going to be somewhere between 15 and 20.
Okay.
So that first burn is going to happen about 2 years after that. You want to let the slash and everything that happened during the thinning decompose a little bit so you don't get the fuel too hot, so you're not damaging your pine trees. And then from there, you do it every 3 to 5 years.
Okay. All right. Very good.
To add to that, another thing the landowners have been asking us is, how is this worth it? So whenever you're burning and you're reducing that understory vegetation, you're leaving more resources for the timber. And so you're adding to wood volume growth. So yes, it is worth it because you are getting more volume on your trees. And then another huge thing to me is the fire lanes. Is the access that you get to ride around your property easier because you have these maintained fire lanes. And also it's a good hunting location along the fire lanes. And if you're considering selling your property, prescribed burn is something you should think about to clean it up and just make it look nicer.
Yeah, definitely an aesthetic value for it as well.
Very good. Now, let's say that I have some property. I don't want to cut my trees. I love my trees. I don't want to cut and sell my trees, but I do like to go out and enjoy it. I like to hunt. I like to fish. Anything you guys can do for me in that prospect?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we do all kinds of habitat management. We can write you a wildlife management plan. Yeah, absolutely. We can manage your hunting. I mean, if you're not wanting to hunt out there, but you want to let people hunt out there, we can manage your hunting lease.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of opportunity for entering into a conservation easement with like a land trust, where that's a tax break for you. It's something we can guide you through, but it's just essentially you're wanting to create that property as a natural habitat, and you're wanting it to leave it as a natural habitat forever.
Right.
And then you're not worried about the next person. Say you move on and go to your next life.
Right.
And the next person has that property. That's a deed restriction. You can't go out there and cut the timber out of it. So it's always going to be a native property.
Nice.
Burning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's all kinds of things we can do.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I think it's really important that, again, if you are a landowner, even if you're an existing client of Bird Forestry, there are things that we can help you think of to get, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the whole idea with a forestry consultancy company is to help you get the highest and best use of your property. Also, if you're an urban dweller, you're in North Texas, you're in Dallas, and you're looking to possibly either retire or to have a place out in East Texas, first of all, we'd love to have you. Be great. Come on. We'd love to have you out here. East Texas is God's country. I'm a fifth generation East Texan. And by the way, it's a perfect time for me to mention that we are all graduates of the Harvard of the Piney Woods, which is Stephen F. Austin State University. So, Axum Jacks. But no, if you're considering making this investment, but you're kind of scared off by it because you're like, I don't know that I want to take care of that. I mean, that's a big hassle, a big headache. Call Bird Forestry. We can tell you what to expect and then again, partner with you to help you maintain that investment and make it an ease for you. Make it so that whenever you're traveling, if you are going to be an absentee landowner, you know that you have somebody helping you steward the property, make sure that, again, like Cheyenne mentioned, that trespassing is not happening. I mean, imagine a vacant home in the middle of the city, how much trespassing there could be there. Out in the woods, that's liability that could come to you and your property. We can help you with that. We can help guide you through that whole process. So with that, do we need to cover anything else? I mean, I think this is a pretty good little intro deal, right?
I think we covered the
Feel good?
basics.
Yeah.
I think it's a little teaser.
Yeah, like that. Cheyenne, you got anything? All right. Well, folks, if you are watching this live, thank you very much. If you're happy to watch it through YouTube, the phone number has been scrolling across. Call us. You can visit us at birdforestry.com. We're going to keep bringing these to you, maybe, I don't know, whatever Cheyenne makes me do, once a month or whatever. But we want to have some tax experts, some legal experts, some environmental experts come on and provide you either the prospective landowner or the existing landowner to come on and talk and just give you as much information as we possibly can and remind you that Bird Forestry is here to be your partner in your land ownership. So with that, thanks for joining us. Good.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.